The Galaxy Tab S8 is Samsung's direct competitor to Apple's iPad Air 4. The two tablets cost about the same, they have a lot of features in common, but there are also some very important differences that you should know about before you make your choice. I consider both of these to be medium-sized tablets, which should make them very popular options. The Tab S8 is slightly taller than the iPad Air 4, but it's also narrower because of the aspect ratio. In terms of actually handling the devices or for portability, the differences in size aren't significant, but you will notice how different they are as soon as you start using them. For example, the Tab S8 16:10 aspect ratio is great for watching video because you're maximizing the size of the display for content and you're left with very small black bars. The iPad Air 4 has an aspect ratio of 23:16, so it's very close to 3:2. Meaning that you will have larger black bars when you're watching content, but you'll have more width to work with when you're taking notes in portrait mode, and you'll also have a little more height when you're multitasking in landscape mode. Now, speaking of the displays, let's quickly look at the specs and then talk about how they perform for different types of use. The iPad Air 4 has a 10.9-inch 60Hz P3 display with a resolution of 1640 by 2360 and 264 pixels per inch. The Tab S8 has a slightly larger 11-inch display. It offers 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate. It has a resolution of 1600 by 2560 and a slightly higher pixel density of 274 pixels per inch. Both displays are very good. While we're not getting the Super AMOLED display that Samsung offers on the S8 Plus or the S8 Ultra, and we're not getting the Liquid Retina XDR display from the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, but for the price, the colors look great, the image is beautiful and sharp, and so far I've really enjoyed watching movies, surfing the web, and gaming on both devices. Now, as far as brightness, the iPad Air 4 looks brighter and it's also a bit less reflective. So if you're going to be using your tablet outside or in bright environments where you're likely to have to deal with reflections, the iPad Air 4 is the better option. On the other hand, 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate on the Tab S8 is really nice to have. You're getting a more fluid and responsive user experience, and things like opening apps, changing settings, and scrolling look smoother. At the same time, the Tab S8 is also able to lower the refresh rate for when you're doing things that wouldn't benefit from a higher refresh rate, and this helps it preserve battery life. Apple does have a similar feature, it's called ProMotion, but at this time it's only available on the more expensive iPad Pro models. Now, checking out the design, the two look very similar, but there are some important differences. So first, both devices have a solid feel and a premium look with rounded corners, squared off edges, and smaller bezels all the way around. We're getting volume controls and power buttons, and in both cases, there is a fingerprint sensor incorporated into the power button for biometric authentication. The Tab S8 also has facial recognition with the front-facing camera. It's less secure than the fingerprint sensor, but you do have the option to use it. Now, one major advantage of the Tab S8 is that it has a micro SD card slot, which lets you expand the internal storage by up to 1 terabyte. This is going to give you a lot more storage space, but remember that it's almost exclusively used for files and not for the apps and games that you want. Now, the next important difference has to do with speakers. Both tablets have 4 speaker grills, but the iPad Air 4 only has 2 speakers, while the Tab S8 actually has 4 AKG tuned speakers. Now, as far as the audio quality, the iPad Air 4 speakers are good, but they're not nearly as good as the ones on the Tab S8. I mostly use headphones, so it's not a huge deciding factor for me, but if you do plan on using speakers for gaming or for watching movies or listening to music, the Tab S8 is the way to go. Now, moving on to the camera systems, the iPad Air 4 has a 7 megapixel front-facing camera versus a higher resolution 13 megapixel 4K camera on the Tab S8. And here's a quick sample of the camera and microphone. Here's a camera and microphone sample from the Tab S8 and the iPad Air 4. This will give you a pretty good idea of what the camera is going to look like and also about what the microphones are going to sound like. So you're going to see that the Tab S8 has a much wider angle. This is a much tighter shot on the iPad Air 4. And the Tab S8 also has the auto follow feature. So if I move to the side, you'll see that the camera is going to follow me. It's kind of like Apple's center stage, and that's something that the iPad Air 4 doesn't have. Now, moving on to the rear-facing cameras, the iPad Air 4 has a 12 megapixel wide camera The Tab S8 has a dual camera system with a 13 megapixel wide camera and a 6 megapixel ultra wide. For the most part, I don't use the rear facing cameras on my tablets because I always have my phone with me and it's just so much more convenient, but here are a couple of shots from both. Both tablets have smart connectors that allow them to communicate with the dedicated keyboard cases. The iPad Air 4 is compatible with Apple's smaller version of the Magic Keyboard, which costs $300, while the Tab S8 has two dedicated book cover keyboards from Samsung, which sell for between $150 and $200. Now, using the links in the description, I was able to get the Samsung book cover keyboard Slim for free, which was really a nice bonus. Now, overall, I like the build quality and the feel of the keys and the trackpad better on the Magic Keyboard, but I do appreciate the fact that the book cover keyboard protects the S Pen while it's being transported, and the fact that I can separate the back from the keyboard itself, so I can use the Tab S8 in tablet mode while still protecting the back and having a place to store the S Pen. Now, Samsung includes the new S Pen with the price of the Tab S8, whereas in the case of the iPad Air 4, you'll need to buy the second generation Apple Pencil separately for an additional $130. So factor that into the cost comparison if you know that you're going to need a stylus. Now, the S Pen can be stored on the side or the back of the Tab S8, but it only charges on the back. The second generation Apple Pencil is stored and charges on the side of the iPad Air 4. Both have worked really well for me. There's very little latency, and since both displays are fully laminated, the image looks like it's painted right on top of the display, and the tip of the stylus looks like it comes in contact with the content that's being created. I also want to point out that each stylus has a very different feel to it when it's hitting the display. The tip of the S Pen is softer, so when you write or draw with it, it's going to feel more like a pen that's writing on a pad of paper where the pages compress as you apply pressure. The Apple Pencil has more of a firm tip and it feels like you're writing on a single sheet of paper that's placed on a hard surface. One isn't definitively better than the other, it's just going to come down to personal preference. And one more advantage of the S Pen is that it offers Bluetooth functionality, so you can use it to control media playback, to take pictures, and for a few other useful tasks. Now let's quickly discuss performance. So the iPad Air 4 comes with the A14 Bionic chip, and both the 64 and the 256 gigabyte models come with 4 gigs of RAM. The Tab S8 features the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chip, and both the 128 and the 256 gigabyte models come with 8 gigs of RAM. If you're curious about how this new chip compares in terms of benchmark, for single core performance, we're looking at 1578 on the iPad Air 4 versus 1043 on the Tab S8. And for multi-core performance, we're looking at 4195 versus 3194. In both cases, a higher number is an indicator of better performance. But of course, benchmarks are just that. They don't actually tell us the full story about real life use. So let's move on and start with multitasking. Apple introduced some new multitasking capabilities with iPadOS 15, and the iPad Air 4 can take advantage of all of them. You can, of course, have two apps open side by side. You can have pop-up and slide over windows, and you can use the new multitasking menu to quickly see multiple windows within the same app. The Tab S8 uses the latest Android 12 and One UI 4.1, which continue to evolve and improve the multitasking and the overall user experience. The new dynamic multi-window toggle allows you to have 3 apps open at the same time, which is really nice when you're doing research and you need several sources. I do want to mention that this feature is not quite as convenient as it is on the much larger Tab S8 Ultra because the display on the Tab S8 is smaller, but again, it's still a nice feature to have. As far as available apps, both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store have plenty of options for pretty much everything that you need. In general, I'm going to give the edge to the iPad Air 4 because the apps seem to be better optimized, but the gap continues to shrink. There are still some creative apps like Affinity Photo and Procreate, which are only available for the iPad, but at least there's an Android version of LumaFusion coming soon. Now, Apple continues to lead the tablet world in terms of long-term operating system updates. So for example, my 8-year-old iPad Air 2 is still compatible with the current iPad OS. I really like seeing that Samsung continues to improve with this, and they're now offering 4 years of operating system updates and 5 years of security updates. I think long-term operating system support is extremely important. These are very powerful devices and they aren't cheap, so there's no reason why they shouldn't last you for many years. Now, moving on to battery life, it's a little bit of an unfair comparison because I've been using the iPad Air 4 since the day it was released, and the Tab S8 is relatively new. When I look at my old notes, I still see that the Tab S8 is lasting longer than the iPad Air 4 did. I was getting about 10 hours of use on the iPad Air 4 versus about 13 to 14 hours on the Tab S8. The Tab S8 also accepts faster charging at 45 watts versus 30 on the iPad Air 4, and I would recommend getting a high capacity charger regardless of which one of these you pick. Now, if I'm not gaming, I always get through a full day on a single charge, and when I do play, it really comes down to how much. If I sit down and play 4 hours of PUBG, then I'm going to need to charge any mobile device that I use. So it's really going to come down to how you use your tablet. And speaking of PUBG, it runs extremely smooth on both tablets. On the iPad Air 4, I can go to balanced for graphics if I want extreme frame rate, and I can do Ultra HD for graphics and ultra frame rate. On the Tab S8, I can go all the way up to HDR for graphics if I want extreme frame rate, and Ultra HD for graphics with ultra frame rate. Now, both tablets can also smoothly run Genshin Impact and pretty much any other game that I try to play without any type of lag or stuttering. When it comes to streaming games, I pair my Xbox controller, I fire up Xbox Game Pass, and I'm all set. Both tablets have beautiful displays, so the games look great, and of course both could run any game smoothly and without any dropped frames as long as I had a strong Wi-Fi connection. The Tab S8 uses Wi-Fi 6E versus Wi-Fi 6 on the iPad Air 4, but my current mesh network only supports Wi-Fi 6, and I'm curious to see what will happen when I upgrade. The iPad Air 4 base model comes with 64 gigabytes for $599, and then there is a 256 gigabyte model for $749. The base Tab S8 model comes with twice the storage, so you're getting 128 gigabytes for $699, or you can go up to 256 gigs for $779. I'm using the prices on the Apple and Samsung websites, but you can usually find better prices using the links in the description. Now remember that with the Tab S8, you also get a free S Pen, and you should check to see if that deal for a free book cover keyboard is still running. Now you should see how the Tab S8 Ultra compares with the 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro. Hopefully this comparison was helpful. Click on my face to subscribe. You know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.